And as I dove into our pre-life soul plan as to his existence and mine, there were a couple things that I found out. One was he actually stayed longer to be with me. And so I was so grateful for that, because up until I had had that connection with him, I had never felt that type of love. Even in my 25-year marriage, I had never been loved the way that he loved me. And so we made this beautiful agreement that he was like, I will stay longer to love you. And he had never felt loved the way that I had loved him. And so we got to share this precious short period of time, but we got to feel a type of love that we had never felt before.
Welcome to the Spirit Sisters podcast. My name is Karina Machado, and I'm the author of Spirit Sisters, Women's True Stories of the Paranormal. In this podcast, I'll revisit the women behind my most unforgettable stories and unearth new tales to chill, intrigue, astound, and offer hope. You'll hear first-hand accounts of sacred journeys, spirit encounters, near-death experiences, angels, mysteries, marvels, and love more powerful than death. Whatever you believe about the afterlife, I invite you to open your minds and hearts as ordinary people reveal their extraordinary encounters. I acknowledge the Darawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land of Sutherland Shire in Australia, where I live and record Spirit Sisters, and I recognise their continuing connection to lands, waters and community. I pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. Hi friends, it's lovely to be back with you after such a long time. Thanks for joining us around the virtual hearth today to warm yourself with a story. As for me, I've been working on my novel, I've been integrating my 2023 Camino, that's a mammoth work in progress, and I've also, surprisingly for me, completed a second, shorter Camino in May this year. This time we started from the beautiful Spanish city of León. I'll share more in an upcoming episode about the return to the Camino and how that journey continues to so deeply move me. But for now, I want to introduce a shining star of a return guest. Michelle Clare is a psychic medium and near-death experiencer who I welcomed onto the podcast in an episode that aired on November 15, 2021. I'll link to it in the description below. This time, Michelle is back to primarily share about her journey of grief following the recent passing of her partner Gary. This is a good time for me to let you know that today's episode deals with suicide. If you find this challenging, please do reach out for support. In Australia, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14, but do seek out services appropriate for where you are. I know that so many of you have gone through the shock and the grief of the kind of loss that Michelle describes. So it's my sincere hope that her story supports you as you navigate your grief in your own way and your own time. I so appreciate Michelle's generosity of spirit in sharing her very personal experience, which, as she poignantly states, is not bypassed by her calling as a psychic medium. However, there are aspects of her vocation and experience of multiple NDEs which do offer a perspective that invites in the light and may hopefully support you if you are grieving the loss of a loved one to suicide. On that note of offering healing and support, I send you my love and gratitude from a sunshiny Sydney winter's day, and I also send you un abrazo infinito, that's Spanish for a never-ending hug. Enjoy my conversation with Michelle Clare. You're listening to Spirit Sisters. I'm your host, Karina Machado. I'm so delighted today to have a beautiful returning guest. The lovely Michelle Clare is coming back to us from Arizona. Now, I had introduced Michelle in an episode that I released on the 15th of November 2021. Michelle has come back. She's been on quite the journey in the interim, and I've got Michelle on the line to tell us about that journey. But before we start, I am going to read out a little bit of her bio so that you get a sense of who the wonderful Michelle is. Michelle Clare is a multifaceted practitioner with an abundance of spiritual expertise. As a certified medium, angel intuitive, and spiritual coach, she navigates the realms beyond our physical existence. Additionally, Michelle brings her gifts as a medical intuitive and energetic healer to illuminate the paths of healing and self-discovery. Having survived 3 near-death experiences and having had 2 shared death experiences, Michelle's journey is marked by resilience and profound transformation. Michelle is excited to share new information about soul plans, shared death experiences, and navigating the delicate landscape surrounding suicide. So here we are with Michelle back on the show. Michelle, welcome to Spirit Sisters.
Hi, Karina. Thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, it's such a delight. The conversation that we had together 2.5 years ago remains one of my favorites. It was so very rich. And the sharing of your near-death experiences, especially that third most profound one, was just so detailed and multi-layered that I've never forgotten it. It's one of those.
Oh,
Now,
thank you.
now, a lot has changed for you in those 2.5 years since we last spoke. You've experienced, Michelle, a journey of deep love and deepest grief, which I'm so honored to have you on the show today to share a little bit more with us, on that journey today. Before we begin, now I will link in the show notes to our previous conversation so that our audience can go back and listen in detail to your near-death experience. But I wonder if you could just briefly recap, and I know it's a big ask because it was such a detailed experience, but your third and most powerful NDE, which happened, if I'm not mistaken, on the 11th of 2011.
It was on 11/1/2011. So
Oh,
yes,
11/1.
We're just missing 1/1 there. So with that one, and it really was the most profound, life-changing one for me. Not that they all didn't change me in different ways, but this is the one where I literally felt I was given a choice. I could either go home to that heavenly realm or I could stay. And so that day I was up on the ladder in my kitchen, and I have 14-foot ceilings. I was about 12 feet off the ground, changing a battery operated candle. And I felt the ladder start to shift. And as it started to shift, I remember just thinking, this is going to hurt. And in that moment, I was ripped out of my body, not in a painful way, but in a fast way, standing with these 3 people that I didn't know, an Asian man, a Hawaiian man, and an Egyptian woman. And yet, even though I did not know them or recognize them from this lifetime, I felt like they were close family, that they were close friends, that they knew me really well. And as I was standing with them, they said to me, what would you like to do? Would you like to stay or would you like to go? So at that point in time, my ladder and my body were almost in a freeze frame position in the air. They were literally, time was standing still. And as I was standing with these beautiful people, I remember thinking, gosh, this is strange. I have forever to decide, but I know my body's going to hit the ground in about a second. And as I was in that energy, I saw a beautiful angel come in dressed in red and gold. And the minute I saw this angel, I knew that it was there to either take me home to that heavenly realm or to shift something so that I could stay here longer. So as I was contemplating how all of this was working, I'm in this unconditional, timeless space. I see my younger 2 kids who are home in the kitchen. And as I see them, I know I need to stay. As I make that decision, I'm really downloaded with a lot of information from spirit world. And I'm told one of the things is that, okay, you can stay, but you have to go back and practice your mediumship now. You have to use it to help people in the way that you can. And I remember being in this perfect space. I remember them telling me that my marriage would end in divorce, most likely. I remember them telling me that there would be more trauma ahead. And I also remember absolutely agreeing to it and deciding to come back in to be able to be here to raise my kids.
Absolutely extraordinary, Michelle. And it speaks so much. I mean, there's so much. We could spend a whole interview just unpacking what you just said. Off the top of my head, spirit guides, we have spirit guides, we have support. They're always there and invisible to us for most of the time, invisible to most of us until these, life-changing moments, these transformational moments that NDEs seem to very much encompass this transformation. So there's angels, the role of angels, and, we could discuss, feel free to obviously share the difference between angels and spirit guides, the roles they play, and just how this support is there. And it's just a matter of, I guess, acknowledging that it's there and asking for their help. Yeah, what are your thoughts around angels, spirit guides, and asking for their support?
Yes, I love all of that. So, to me, angels and spirit guides are life guides. I use those terms interchangeably, the life guide and spirit guide. They really tend to play different roles. So, angels for me really are about this unconditional love and protection. They are the ones that move you a half an inch so you survive. They are the ones where there's the near miss. That's the energy that I feel with the angels. With our life guides, these are going to be souls that have had many, many human incarnations, and they understand how the game of life works on planet Earth. They have mastered it, which makes them a life guide. And what happens in my knowledge from spirit is before we choose to come to planet Earth, we create a blueprint for our life. And in this blueprint, our soul is saying, I would like to learn these lessons. I would like to experience this. Here's part of my mission. And so we choose a team of life guides. We all have at least one. Some people have more. And we choose at least one guardian angel, and some people have more. And we say, okay, this is what my soul wants to learn. I'm going to head into planet Earth now. Your job, angel, is to protect me when I'm in danger that I shouldn't be in. And your job, life guide, is to remind me of my life plan or my mission when I forget. Now, that doesn't really show up as your life guide sending you an email or talking in your ear. It'd be so much easier if it was that way. But what it shows up in our life in the human form is we get the same opportunities over and over again. So whether it's the same lesson and we get the chance to learn it and grow past it, or whether it is like, but I don't want that job, but they keep calling. Wait, they just offered you $10,000 more, but I really don't want that job. Well, maybe there's a reason you're supposed to take that job, right? So the opportunities are really what the life guides keep providing us to keep us on track for our soul plan. And the angels are really about protection. And so because of that, I always like to tell people, none of us are forced to be here on planet Earth. None of us are accidentally here on planet Earth. I don't even care if your story is my mom accidentally got pregnant with me when she was 13. Maybe on the human form, but on a soul level, it wasn't an accident because your soul chose to come in that way. So none of us are accidentally here. Not only are we not accidentally here, we are surrounded by a team of beings of light who are supporting us on this journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that sometimes for me, it's as if I can feel them, and it's a sense of a tingling, a warmth, and it's very present in the moment when it's happening. I think, oh, is that my support, my team?
Right.
How do you feel them these days?
Yeah. So for me, well, I'll tell you, in that near death experience, I didn't even know they were my life guides. That wasn't a term I had in my vocabulary. I just thought they were these really nice people who seemed to know me really well. Michelle wasn't thinking, oh, these are my life guides. I had no idea that that's what they were. It took me months to figure that out. But for me right now, a lot of times I will either get a picture, a visual of them. So they're reminding me who is sending me the information. Most of my information will come through as feelings. So I'm translating what I'm feeling into words. And I like to describe that as looking at someone that you know really well and you know exactly what they're going to say right before they say it. There's not time to process it or think about it or guess what they're going to say. It's just there. And so that's really how I tend to connect with my life guides. Also, I already always know that when I hear something for the third time, it's a message from the universe. So I might have a client say something to me, one of my kids says something, and then a friend. And the minute I hear it the third time, it's like the goosebumps and the antennas go up, and it's like, oh, okay, pay attention. You need to actually hear this.
That's so interesting. I've got a very dear friend, my best friend and collaborator, Sarah. She says exactly the same thing. She says, when they bring it to me 3 times, I know. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I would say too is our angels and our life guides, our loved ones on the other side, they're always trying to get us messages. And it might be the stranger you walk by in the grocery store who says something to you and it makes you think of grandpa, or it makes you think of and reminds you who you are, or one of the goals you have. I mean, it's not always going to be very obvious, but spirit world is constantly speaking to us.
Very encouraging, very encouraging. And the other thing that your brief recap there of your third profound NDE brings up for me is this fascinating interplay between our lives our soul plan, the 3D, and time and space. Time and space, if I'm not mistaken, Michelle, paused for you, or the perception,
Right.
listening to you, it sounds like it paused. Tell us
It
about that.
Yeah, so I will say this about my third near death experience. The most pivotal moment of my life was when time stood still or when I was in a timeless space. So, I mean, the irony in that is just amazing. But in our human form, it's really hard to imagine a timeless space because we're conditioned to be on Earth, and on Earth, time is productive. We need to know what time we need to be to work or when the dog needs fed or whatever's going on in life, right? But when we go to this realm, I want you to think about it as a deep meditation or maybe a breathing exercise where all you can focus on is the present moment. That is the energy in this unconditional, timeless space. It's unconditional love. It's unconditional. There is no time. And I really became aware that what I will tell you is I felt like I was there much longer than a second. I can't tell you how long it was, but it wasn't an earth time second. So there was part of it where earth time did stand still because I had time to think about what I wanted to do and make that decision. So it's really interesting. I believe there's an interplay. When we have a near miss, so this also happened to me probably about a year and a half ago. I had a near miss in a car accident where I saw this car coming across 3 lanes of traffic the wrong direction, headed right at me. And I was bracing for impact. And guess what? Somehow that car went flying right past me, did not hit me. And it also didn't hit any other cars. It ended up in a field. So it was okay. But it was unbelievable because what I was perceiving, I knew there was no way this car was going to miss me. And yet there was some type of divine intervention that changed the timeline or the trajectory just enough that everyone was fine.
I get goosebumps when I hear that because I've heard stories like that before, and often they have to do with vehicles on the road, and it's just fascinating, Michelle. It speaks to the idea that there's guidance, that there's purpose, that we, in concert perhaps with divine intelligence, are working out a plan. I don't know, but I love those stories. They're so interesting.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
well, there is a plan. There's not just
Yeah.
a plan for each of our individual souls, but there's a plan for Earth and there's a plan to up level everyone's consciousness. So there's always more than one plan at play.
And I want you to talk more about that a little later on, because I know that you talk about the human plan and the soul plan. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
love to hear more about that. But I'd just like to go back a little bit as we finish up talking about that NDE. So you were downloaded with a lot of information, including the knowledge of some future events to come, trauma, your divorce, and also the knowledge that you were to embrace your mediumship. Tell us
Absolutely.
about, yeah, how things unfolded. And I know that you went on a big journey of physical recovery as well, a brain injury and all sorts of things. Tell us
Right.
what you would like to share around how you came to live into, I guess, the knowledge that you received in those moments.
So, right after that happened, it took me a couple months to really just function. And that was still at maybe a 50% level on a good day, just from the physical trauma. But once I started recovering, I started getting information for loved ones or friends from their loved ones in spirit. And so it kind of, even though I knew what I had agreed to, I was a little bit unnerved by this. So I started going to counseling. And as spirit would have it, they took me to the perfect therapist who said, "Oh, Michelle, what a gift. Let's get you a mentor." And so then I started mentoring and training and really wanting to hone in, because if I was going to do this, I wanted to know that I was getting accurate information, that this was, coming from the right place. I had my human fears around it. I really did, even though I had agreed to do this. And so as I took this path of really stepping into, honestly, the promise that I made to God, source, or the divine, that I would come back and do my mediumship, it started to drive somewhat of a wedge between my husband and myself at the time, because he was very uncomfortable with it. And not only that, anyone who's had a near-death experience, and we have data that shows this, you don't come back the same person. You can't have one of those experiences and come back who you were prior to that. And we also know that over 60% of people that have near-death experiences come back with psychic mediumship abilities because you've touched the other side, right? I truly felt it was not Michelle holding up my end of the deal. It became a burning passion within me to help people in this way. And it was a calling. It was so much more than Michelle making an agreement. And so I decided that I just really needed to follow this path. And at first, he kind of seemed supported, but he seemed to think it was going to be like my hobby, or kind of like, oh, look, she's going to go, play a round of golf or whatever, and then maybe play again in 6 months. But it wasn't that. It was my passion. And so every step I took closer to that, he took kind of a step away. And so after time, it became very clear for many, many reasons that this marriage needed to come to an end. And so after 25 years, I ended up filing for divorce.
Yes, that's no small feat. But there is, as you say as well, the NDE has come back changed, and there's also a lot of data, which I can't think of what the actual statistic is off the top of my head, but just around near-death experiences being divorced after the experience too. Yeah,
it's over 80% of NDEers end in divorce.
I guess you are just not the same person. So it would take a particular kind of partner to be able to incorporate all of those pieces. So you came back with all that info. You began to embrace your mediumship. I wonder, what was your idea of the spirit world, of mediums, of mediumship prior to this experience, the NDE?
Right. So it took me a long time to actually even know what mediumship was or near-death experiences. I knew I was having experiences. I didn't know they were NDEs. And it was probably maybe about 5 or 6 years before my last near-death experience that I really started getting into mediumship. And at that point in time, we had like John Edwards on TV doing crossing over. So it still wasn't everywhere, but you could start seeing it. And as I mean, it was just like truth for me. I knew this was truth. And so for me, one of the things that was really important was making sure that the information that I would bring through was accurate. Because one of the challenges with mediumship is we don't have a governing board, and you can find them across the spectrum. And there are mediums who are frauds, and there are mediums who have maybe some insight, but not really enough that they should be giving readings professionally. So after I had mentored for a few years, I became a certified medium. And the way that worked, because I wanted to do something to, number one, prove to myself that the information I was getting was that good and that accurate. But number two, I wanted to do something to give myself some more credentials so that it wasn't just the person on the corner. And the way that worked was we would have 5 blind readings. They would say, okay, log on to Skype at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. And you would log on and you would just start giving this person that you didn't know information. I feel a young male coming through. I feel a head injury. I feel whatever it is. And they're just sitting over there scoring you. And they end up turning that in. And so to do that, you have to be certified. You have to pass all of these tests. And then, you get to become certified. So that was important to me on that journey. Not necessarily to set myself apart in any way, but to give even my clients comfort that I was the real deal.
And what is your first memory of receiving a message or a visitation from the spirit world?
It was actually when I was 13 and my grandfather passed. And I didn't know anything about mediumship at that point in time, but he had transitioned, and I would give my mom messages from him. I'd say, Grandpa said, and I'd tell her whatever. And she'd say, well, that's what you think Grandpa would say if he was still here. And so I realized real quickly, not everyone's having this conversation with Grandpa. And it just became my own dialogue. So I kind of quit sharing messages. And then when my grandma transitioned, I noticed the same thing was happening. And so I knew I had this ability to communicate. It was never scary. It was always love and light and really just connection to my loved ones.
That's lovely. Yeah. So Michelle, since we last spoke, you experienced the loss by suicide of your partner. Now, I'm grateful for you being on today to share about this. What would you be open to telling us about this experience, this journey that you've been on recently?
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's only been 8 months since he's transitioned. So it's been a fairly recent journey. I would say this. So I knew he had depression. That's one of the first things people always ask me. Yes, I knew he had depression. There had been moments where he had to turn off his phone and his computer and lay in bed for a couple of days, and then he'd kind of come back, you know? And so it wasn't that I didn't know that, but I will tell you, this man had every self-help book that you can imagine. He had done brain training classes. He had tried antidepressants. He felt worse on antidepressants, but he really had battled this for decades. And I knew the depression was there, but he was in a really good place, and we were planning our future and all of this stuff together. And so I ended up going out of town, and I texted him. I was texting with him at 10:30 that morning, and he was telling me about the motivational webinar he had just been on and all of this stuff. And then when I got home that evening, he didn't respond. And the next day he didn't respond. And so I called his work. They said he had called out sick. I drove by his place. His car was there. His daughter's car was there. So I thought, okay, he's just having, one of these depressive spells. And then the next day, it was nighttime. I was in my bathroom. I was getting ready for bed. And I actually felt him come in behind me, and I felt him standing behind me. And I heard him say to me, "You sure are beautiful." And at that moment, I just started shaking and crying because I knew this was mediumship. I did not want this to be mediumship. And so I made it over to my bed and lay down because my body was like going out from just this. And I felt him lay down behind me, and he put his arm over me and he said, "I wanted to be the one to tell you." So I found out that he had transitioned from him, and then his sister confirmed it hours later.
Oh, Michelle, I'm so sorry for your loss. What's your partner's name?
Gary.
Gary. So this was a shared death experience in a sense, would you say, or?
No, I've had shared death experiences, and they're a little bit different. We can talk about those too.
Yeah.
But what this was to me, it was a mediumship experience where he was coming in and saying, "I'm not here anymore, but I love you." And it was just very because up until that point in time I did not know. So he was literally the one who told me he had transitioned.
Incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. And how are you taking care of yourself after this? How are you looking after yourself, Michelle? I'm asking because I know that there will be in the audience members of our community listening who have experienced something similar.
Yeah. So my healing probably looks different than a lot of people's. But I am happy to share the tools. I mean, I've done all sorts of different things. So literally at the beginning, as anyone knows who's had any great loss from any type of transition, it's literally one breath at a time. There's no other way around it. It's one breath at a time. As time went on, I've done a retreat, which was very helpful. I've done breath work. I did a pre-life planning regression where I went back to see my soul plan and his soul plan. I've done counseling. I've done biofeedback. I've done so many different things to really try to reset and move forward. Here's one of the things that I know. No matter who you are, no matter how deep your wound is, healing is possible. It doesn't mean we're going to be who we were before that. I'll never be that version of Michelle again, right? And this is like a scar that I will carry, but it doesn't mean that I can't heal from it. And as a medium, I know our loved ones want us to heal. Our loved ones are on that other side, cheering us on, bringing in opportunities. The last thing they want is for us to quit living. So for me, my healing has really been quite a long journey. And I'm only 8 months in, but it feels like 8 years sometimes. One of the best questions that my friend Susan Drum said to me was, she said, Michelle, what does healing look like for you? And that was probably about 6 weeks after he had passed. And until somebody said that to me, I didn't actually even realize healing was possible. And then what I started to realize is it's a beautiful, ever evolving question. Maybe right now healing looks like getting through the grocery store without crying. And then tomorrow, maybe healing looks like I can go sit outside for 10 minutes or whatever it is, but it's this ever evolving question. And if we think about our lives and we think, okay, if I could just get 0.001% better every day, over a year, that will add up. Over 2 years, it will add up to more. But the minute that we close ourselves down and say, I will never heal from this, my life is over, we have just created a new reality.
As you're speaking, and as you said, you mentioned the scar. So there's this beautiful light falling on you, which it almost looks like a scar on your face, but it's a seam of light. And if you don't mind, I'll take a photo of the screen because it's quite extraordinary. Can you see it?
I do.
There we go. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that will be so supportive to so many people in our audience. One thing I wonder and was thinking of as you were telling us about that, Michelle, was how did your NDE and or your mediumship and your knowledge about the expansiveness of reality, how did all of that support you along your grief, or how is it supporting you along your grief journey?
Yeah. So, in a lot of ways. So number one, I do feel like I have connection with him. Not all the time. I'm like every other human. He's not here in a body. I don't get to talk to him 24/7, all of that. But I will say one thing that's important for people to know: with all of my spiritual knowledge and my mediumship, there's still no way for me to bypass the human grief. It still will take me over. I'll hear the song. I'll notice the date. Whatever these different things are. I'll have the dream visit. I'll have whatever these are. The human grief there's no way around it. But one of the things that helped me with my spiritual knowledge and my mediumship was diving into our soul plan. And as I dove into our pre-life soul plan as to his existence and mine, there were a couple of things that I found out. One was he actually stayed longer to be with me. And so I was so grateful for that, because up until I had had that connection with him, I had never felt that type of love. Even in my 25-year marriage, I had never been loved the way that he loved me. And so we made this beautiful agreement that he was like, I will stay longer to love you. And he had never felt loved the way that I had loved him. And so we got to share this precious short period of time, but we got to feel a type of love that we had never felt before. Then the other part of the soul agreement was this: I was and am an active medium. I work with this. I talk to groups. I have people that I can help with the knowledge and understanding of suicide that maybe others don't have. And so part of the agreement was, if he does this, I will go on to help people move through it. And I do not ever believe that suicide is written in the soul plan. I do not believe that is how anyone is destined to exit this life. But I will tell you, if that's how they leave, they are still met with love and compassion.
That's a beautiful message to share today. What that makes me want to ask you is, you touched on having had some contact with Gary since his transition. Has he let you know at all how he's doing, what he's doing? What's your sense of where he is now?
Yeah. So really, when he got welcomed into that light, he still had a lot of human issues that he was working through, obviously, because of the way that he chose to transition. And he was really supported by what I'm going to call a team of light workers, whether you want to call them counselors or this or that. But there was really, yes, he was in that heavenly realm, but he still needed some support on understanding or processing the decision he had made and seeing how it would affect everyone who he had left behind as he moved through that. When I connect with him now, his energy is very clean, very clear, very strong, so it's a process. And one thing that I know is that as I heal here on this earthly realm, it almost sends him healing energy in heaven, and he sends me the healing energy from heaven as he's healing. So we still have this very deep soul connection. And in an interesting way, we're still healing together.
That makes me also think of how we talk about, in the spiritual community, we talk about the interconnectedness between people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But I often think of it as it's not just between the people on the planet. It also encompasses nature and discarnate beings. The interconnected web, the tapestry, is so much bigger than we can imagine. Would you like to just expand on that at all, about how we are always connected?
Oh, absolutely. So it is. It's like a web, and we are always connected to spirit world. They're always connected to us. Yes, we're connected to the planet and the people and the nature and all of those things, but you actually cannot disconnect from the web. I'm going to just tell you that, from the web of life, as I will call it right now. I don't know. I've never used that before, but you cannot, because that's like saying you could disconnect from who you are. You could disconnect from source. You can't. When I see people who are atheists, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not worried about it. I know that was their soul plan. They chose to come and believe there was no God so they could feel disconnected, right? But you and I both know that spark of light is still in them, and you can't actually disconnect from that. We can perceive a disconnect, or we can feel like we're disconnected, but the truth is you cannot disconnect.
That reminds me of another thing I've read, a saying, and again, I think it came from a near-death experiencer. You can't mess this thing up, the person said.
Mm-mm.
Like, they saw that in their life review. And it also makes me think of what you said prior about your soul agreement, your soul plan, and how Gary chose to exit in that way, but you are not using it, but I guess you're harnessing the experience for the ultimate good, to support people who might have experienced the same thing and are going through a really hard time.
Right. And I think that so many of the trials that we go through in life, if you don't use them to help someone else in the same situation or to make this world a better place, yes, you will always have the value of what your soul learned, but you can make it a much bigger ripple. It doesn't have to just be a dot, make it a ripple. I mean, because one thing that I will tell you with Gary, he fought depression for decades, literally decades. And I got to the point where I really realized that for him, it was like fighting cancer. He fought so hard. And when I have that perception of him and I can see how many books he read, how many courses he took, how many things he tried to heal, I have nothing except love and appreciation for the fight and for him staying as long as he did.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I would love for him to be here another 40 years. And there's no part of me that is saying suicide's a good option. I don't believe so, because here's the challenge of suicide. Now that he's in that heavenly realm, he still had agreements with myself and other souls here that have now been left open-ended. And so his work's not done.
Mm.
He's in that heavenly realm now, trying to find other humans that he could tap on the shoulder or kind of help to fulfill the agreements that he left a void in.
So it feels like we have our purpose, and then perhaps incorporated within our purpose, lots of tasks and people, specific things we need to do. And death doesn't end that plan, our purpose, it continues. And we find other ways. How will Gary, how is he moving on with his plan and purpose, do you think?
Well, so I'll tell you, when I do speaking engagements, I can literally feel him standing behind me. And so part of his goal, if it was to support me in this lifetime, even though he's not there in his body, I can still feel his support there. I don't know what it will look like for his daughters. I can only tell you like what it looks like for me. But also since his transition, there have been other opportunities that have shown up for me. So I'm like, he always used to open the door for me, the car door, the door to the restaurant, the door to the house. And so there's this energy of him still having my back and still opening doors, even though I don't know exactly what that's going to look like over my lifetime.
Oh, that's very beautiful to share. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, I guess just to summarize this, is there a particular message that you would like to share with people who have lost a loved one to suicide, and sharing it from your perspective as a medium, as a near-death experiencer, and of course as someone who has lived experience of losing a beloved person to suicide?
Yeah, well, I would tell you this. The number one thing that I learned quickly on is you cannot go down the rabbit holes. You cannot go, what if, should have, could have, I would have done this. The minute you find your mind starting to go in that direction, you literally have to stop and you have to say, I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to love you in this life. And I have used that a million times, and it has saved me so much unnecessary heartache, because the minute we choose to go down rabbit holes of what if, should have, could have, it's a no win. It's a no win. And that is the last thing that our loved ones want for us on the other side. So do yourself a favor, do your loved ones a favor. Don't play that game with yourself. You're not going to win it. It's not productive. But the other thing that I would say is, because our loved ones want us to still go on and have this productive life, one of the things that I will tell you is, on some level, suicide is an acceptable exit plan, because on this planet, we all have that option. Now, thank God most people won't take it, but there are other dimensions in the universe where you can't unplug yourself from your created reality at the time, right? But on Earth, that is a possibility. And I would never advocate for it. I don't think it's a good option for anyone. But here's the thing, on some level, God, source, the divine, has let that be a possibility here. Otherwise, it would be one of these things where our soul just blips back in, like you can't get out, right? And that's not the experience. So knowing that your loved one in spirit is surrounded in light and love, that they are cheering you on. Yes, they didn't learn all the lessons they had hoped to learn. They're probably going to have to come back and redo some stuff. But the goal is to realize that they are alive and doing amazing and still supporting you on your journey.
Oh, thank you so much. I know that that will bless and support so many audience members. Thank you, Michelle. You touched before on the shared death experience, and I know that you have experienced more than one of these.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about this, and what's the deeper message behind the shared death experience, do you think?
Right. So the first time I had a shared death experience, I didn't actually know what was happening, but I was okay with it. My beautiful white German Shepherd had lymphoma, and we had to have her euthanized. And so I was laying, we had the vet come to our house. I was laying on the floor with her in my pajamas, crying. Nothing about Michelle was trying to be a medium that day. I was just tugging her and loving on her and sobbing all at the same time. And after they had administered the anesthesia, I felt her soul gently release from her body, and it felt like a feather on the wind. It was very gentle, very easy. And about 2 seconds after that, I heard my mom, who's in the heavenly realm, say, I've got her now. And then it was about 30 seconds to a minute later when the vet said her heart has stopped. But I had gently felt this beautiful breeze disconnect with her soul and her body. So that was the first one that I had had. The second one I had was more intense than that. And it actually just happened this January in 24. And so now by this point, I know what shared death experiences are. So I knew what was happening, but I was at the hair salon getting my hair done, and I was back under the dryer, and my lady came back and she said, we just had to call 911. There's some guy passed out up front. And as I got up, I heard Spirit say to me, fentanyl overdose. And as I'm walking to the front of the store, he was outside the store. I could feel his soul or his spirit around me. By the time I got up there, the police had arrived. They were starting CPR. There was nothing for me to do, but I could feel him. And so I started praying and calling in the angels and calling in the light for him, for the first responders, just that they would have support during this time. So I go back and I sit in my lady's chair. And at this point, they had loaded him into an ambulance and they were driving him to the hospital. I have no idea which hospital. But he and I had linked in, and I could feel that he was coding, and I could feel the paddles on his chest. I could feel the CPR they were giving him. So once again, I just started calling in the light, and then I gently felt him disconnect. So I have no way to call the hospital to say, did he pass? Because I didn't even know his name. But I knew as a medium, and I knew from what I had felt, that he also gently let go like that feather on the wind.
It's gentle, that beautiful gentle, that the idea that it's a gentle exit. That's lovely.
Yeah.
So again, I guess that speaks to our interconnectedness.
It does. And it would also, this is really important for people to know. The soul is not connected to the trauma that the body might be going through. So his body, it didn't look peaceful, right? They were giving him CPR, they were giving him injections, they were working on him. It didn't look peaceful, but his soul was not connected to any of that, because on a soul level, we do not need to carry that trauma or that pain. It doesn't serve us. And so his soul was really disconnected from what was happening to his body.
The soul. So since I've begun collaborating with my friend Sarah, who's also a near-death experiencer, I've begun to introduce a lot of this language around the soul. I used to talk about spirit a lot, and I still do, but I guess I do wrestle with that distinction. What's the distinction in your understanding between soul and spirit? Is there a distinction?
For me, I guess I don't really use the word spirit. I guess if I use it, it's as like a higher self concept. And I think of the soul as this version of Michelle, and then my spirit would be my higher self. But normally I would say higher self if I was talking about, because I do believe, and I've used this description before. I don't know if I've used this with you, but I want to think of your soul or your spirit or whatever that bigger picture of you is as a sun. Okay. And then in this beautiful sun, there's room for millions of rays of light. Well, Michelle is one ray of light from the sun, or that over soul or higher self concept. So some people might call that spirit, higher self, over soul. But my lifetime as Michelle is just one ray of light from it.
That's really helpful. I love that. Thank you. I've thought of a similar analogy, but it's the ocean and a wave. I just wanted to ask a little bit more, because this was one of the talking points that you suggested as well. The idea of the human plan versus the soul plan. And I know you've touched a little bit on the soul plan. So tell us about this idea of the two perhaps in contrast.
Yeah, they are. So our human plan, very often we say, like, if you work hard, it will pay off, right? In spirit world, it's not a work hard and it will pay off. Spirit world says, go play and it will be attracted to you, right? So we come into life and we have these different ideas of like, oh, okay, let's take a religion, maybe a religion that says you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner. Okay, your soul says, wait, I planned this before I came. It's been approved by God himself. Here I am. This isn't considered a sin. This is considered an experience. You know what I mean? I'm also going to say, obviously, you need to treat people the way you want to be treated. That is like a golden rule, right? But at the same time, there are these things that the humans will say, oh, well, do this and this will happen. But what if we said, instead of working really hard, I want to play in the magic of life and see what happens? The energy of playing in the magic of life will yield a much more productive response than the energy of the human that says, I have to work hard.
I'm just writing that down. Love that.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that I was just hearing, one of the human ideas is, I hear this saying often, like, oh, bad things happen to good people. That's a human thing. We say that, well, at least I hear it in America. Okay, so here's the thing. Bad things happen to good people. Well, those beautiful souls chose opportunities to learn and grow. And when they chose these opportunities, they didn't think of it as a bad thing. They thought of it an experience to grow from. So there's a difference right there in contrast. Now, I know we live on planet Earth and free will does happen. And I don't believe every single thing that happens was predestined or written out in your life plan. But what I know is that your soul is always whole, and it has the power to overcome these human ideas, which really keep us trapped, because we have free will on a soul level. Our soul chose to come here. We have free will on a human level, even if the only free will you have is your perception. So maybe something has happened to me. Let's say Gary's transition. I felt like I had no control over that. No one knew he was planning that. There were no notes. He kept it as so secret. I had no control over that. But the free will I have is in how I'm going to perceive it. And am I going to choose to go down the rabbit holes, or am I going to stop and say, I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to love you in this life, right? So there is the power of free will, which will change your trajectory.
that brings me back to your near-death experience and the choice that you had in that moment. And I feel like we have a choice in every moment, don't we? In every moment. And as you speak, also, I think of the famous eminent psychotherapist Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he famously wrote about being in the horrific depths of Auschwitz. But he made the decision to see beauty in a bowl of rotten soup. He decided he wasn't going to let them take that choice point from him, that agency to have that idea. He decided he would keep that, and this would be his choice to see that.
And what a beautiful way to do that, and I think with everyone, we have that ability. And if he could do it in that situation, we can do it in ours.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I want to play in the magic of life and see what happens. Yes. And so we are coming to the end of our conversation, Michelle, but I wanted to ask you about the boom in NDEs at the moment, we could call it. They're sort of flooding the internet. And I wanted to sort of gather your thoughts on what it is about this moment in our collective experience that is giving rise to this demand, but not just the demand, it's also the stories. They're all coming out and people are sharing them. But there is such incredible demand. Hundreds of thousands of views could be on one experience's sharing. So I wondered, like, from your perspective, what do you think the message of the NDE is for these times?
Yeah. So, well, one thing we know about NDEs being more prevalent now is we have better medical care. CPR was invented. So there was a period in time where these stories were not reported because, number one, there was no support system to talk to people about with them, but also because a lot of those people transitioned because we didn't have CPR or the Heimlich maneuver or something like that. So the way that we are situated right now, just in modern society, gives the opportunity for more NDEs to occur. So that's part of it. But the other thing is this beautiful lesson about near-death experiences. It does not matter your gender, your race, your age, your religion. It does not matter how you die. But these beings of light, these people are finding pretty much all the exact same thing: family, love, unconditional love, timeless space. And so what's really amazing to me about this is I feel that near-death experiences prove the true nature of God. That you're not going to find it in a book, but what you're going to find is person after person who reports bliss, who reports seeing grandma, who reports seeing their dog, who knows they weren't being judged, who on and on and on. And so really the flood of it right now to me is with the human consciousness, where people are saying there's got to be more to life. I need permission to love myself and love my life without feeling like I have to fall anyone's under, like, a religious rule, or without fear of being judged.
That's really powerful. Yeah, permission. They give us permission. And yes, that beautiful unconditional love and that incredible exquisite beauty of that light. It's universal. And I guess it's the truest inclusion. We talk a lot about inclusion in our society today, and the light seems to offer the truest version of that. Everybody, everything, every experience is welcome. And that's my puppy in the background thinking that
Yes.
her barking is welcome right now. I'd also like to ask, before we begin to wrap up, just about, you touched on the permission to love ourselves as well, self-love. How vital is self-love to the healing journey, to the journey of expanding consciousness? What are your thoughts around that, Michelle?
It's absolutely critical, because if you don't love yourself, you're not actually going to be able to love other people fully, because you don't have that personal relationship with yourself. And so loving ourselves might be like, I need to call in sick for work today. I am just not in the space I need to be in, or I need to go take the walk. I need to give myself the time. But we have to be able to really love our own soul and our own expression of who we are before we can love other people to the fullest of who they are. But also, when we think about our life, think about vibrational frequencies and matches. If I don't love myself, I'm not going to attract a partner who can truly love me, because I don't even know how I need to be loved. So a lot of times what I find with clients is they're like, well, I want to attract my soulmate. Well, okay, do you feel like you're the vibration that you want your partner to be? Are you loving yourself the way you want to be loved? Are you supporting yourself? Do you know yourself? Well, no, I just want them to show up. Well, how can they show up? You have to be a vibrational match. So really loving ourselves is of the utmost importance. And I will share this with you. I was just on a call yesterday with a client who is in a very mentally and emotionally abusive relationship. She went to confession. She's Catholic, and she shared this with the priest, and the priest said, well, you need to love him more. And during her reading, Mother Mary came in, and Mother Mary literally said to her, you need to love yourself more. And I just thought, wow. And if we could all love ourselves, not in an ego way, but in a true love of ourselves, that ripple effect for how we would love other people and the compassion and everything that would bring into the planet would be just unbelievable.
It makes me think back to what you were talking earlier about the soul plan. And I was thinking as you were sharing about that soul plan, I sometimes see it as a treasure hunt. There's a sense of play. You talked about the play and the magic of life, and there's almost a sense of play in the way this whole thing is designed. That, you were talking about the difference between the human plan and the soul plan. There is a sense of, can you find the treasure? Can you remember the treasure? And right. Hearing you talk about self-love just then, self-love seems to be almost at the core of that. Can you remember this gem right here? Mm-hmm. Can you find it?
I know. Well, I love that. And that's why a lot of times when I share angel messages, I always end them with saying that you're loved beyond measure, because I know this for a fact. Each one of us is loved beyond measure by Source, God, the divine, our loved ones, our angels, our life guides. And yet in our human veiling of having this experience, we so often forget that.
Thank you. Yes. And maybe that is a good place to leave it. I was going to say to you, is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you'd like to share?
Wow, I feel like we covered so much in this time. I've definitely enjoyed it. I would just encourage people to love themselves deeply, not in an ego way. Love your flaws or the things you perceive as flaws. They're not flaws. Your soul knew it was going to show up in this lifetime, right? What if you just started focusing on the fact that you are exactly perfect right where you are, and there's nothing for you to do except love yourself in that moment? It would really start shifting the energy, which would be what shifts the trajectory of your life, of your friends, of the people you're bringing in, and of your experiences.
Thank you. There's so much here to chew on, so much. How can our audience contact you, Michelle, if they'd like to learn more about your work and get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can find me on my website, Michelle, Michelle, Clare, CLARE.net. And they can book appointments there, find out more about me, see upcoming events if they're in the Arizona area.
Perfect. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes. There's so much that I'm going to go off on my walk to think about now. Is there any final message of hope and light that you'd like to leave us with, Michelle?
Just remembering that we really are all loved beyond measure, and none of us are living this life alone. You have a support team, you have angels, you have life guides, you have loved ones in spirit. And so even in those moments where we feel very humanly alone in this, we are never alone.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was so lovely to see you again and hear about your beautiful story again. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Sisters. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. And don't forget to rate and review the show. Have an experience you'd like to share with me? Get in touch at my website, carinamachado.com, or find me on Facebook at Carina Machado Author. After all, there's nothing more powerful than a story.